Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this segment of One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls, and what a guest we have for you today, Stan Gravois. You've seen Stan in many lights, seen him doing sports, you've seen him at the hospital, you've seen him coaching, teaching. Well, today, we're going to find out everything that makes Stan tick, right here on this episode of One-on-One. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back to One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls. Very pleased to have with me someone who's been instrumental here at HTV for many, many years, but he's been instrumental everywhere he's been. And how did that journey start? Where did it start? What brought him to different levels? We're going to find out today. Stan Gravois is my guest. Stan, good to see you again.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. And it's been a long time coming. But I guess it's better that we have you now because so many things that we could talk about. We'll bring you way back to the earliest years you can remember. Where were you and what do you remember?
Martin, I grew up in Montague, so my whole life has been in Terrebonne Parish. My parents aren't from Terrebonne Parish. Mm-hmm. My mom's from Lafayette, my dad's from Vacherie. Mm-hmm. But he was a sugarcane farmer, moved in the mid-50s down to Montague. Actually lived in Ashland a little bit before that, so the people off of Grand Kai Road can, they know that Ashland area. Right. And he became a general manager of South Coast. There was a big refinery down, I shouldn't say refinery, I should say factory, because they didn't refine sugar. Mm-hmm. They just were a factory that made it into raw sugar down in Montague. My dad was a general manager there. So grew up in Montague, and it was absolutely great. Small community life, a lot of terrific people. Montague was made up primarily of the oil field, Texaco, because that was sort of a regional hub for Texaco. And the South Coast Corporation, that refinery in Montague. So a lot of terrific people that I grew up with, really enjoyed it. And I can't think of a better place to be raised when I was down there in Montague.
A lot of people now realize it's Ashland dump site and Ashland jail, but it wasn't in a plantation before?
It was a plantation. My dad actually moved there in the early 50s. Met my mom at SLI, which is later became USL, which later became UL Lafayette, now UL. And his first opportunity was to work for South Coast.
Although you've accomplished a lot of things, and you're always the front person for a lot of things. You did years of sports here, but you're front person with presentations at the hospital. And you were a front person when you were a coach. But you come from very humble beginning. Who was like that in your family? Your dad was probably a laid-back guy. Your mom, who'd you get that from?
Everybody in my family.
Okay.
My mother and father are my heroes, and they lived very long lives and were great examples to me and my four sisters and my two brothers. Mm-hmm. My two brothers and my four sisters became my heroes. That's who I emulate. That's who I want to be like. Mm-hmm. And when I was working here and doing things and still coming here, that's what I think we have, that great commonality of family. Family's kind of everything. Mm-hmm. So that's where it comes from. I didn't go to school to teach or to get in front of people. People would tell you that I was extremely shy and still pretty shy. Mm-hmm. But what happened along the way, I think coaching kind of brought it out of me. I went to school for advertising design. I went out to Lafayette, to USL at the time, and thought I was going to be working in Houston, at an advertising agency doing something like that. And along the way, my wife, who I actually met and is from the Houma area, but grew up next door to me in Montague from her 8th grade year on. So married my next door sweetheart. She was working here in town. And Dickie Pierce, who was over at South Terrebonne, a baseball coach, who wasn't actually my baseball coach at South Terrebonne, called me up and said, I'd love to have you back here as an assistant baseball coach. And that's the first inkling of teaching and coaching that sort of came into my mind. Certainly owe him a lot, because I'm glad I did. It was something that I really enjoyed, and it was sort of a passion for 29 and a half years.
Yeah, but all these coaches get you to coach with them. Then they start getting you to draw their logos.
Yes.
I mean, so you had multiple skills. They tapped into that pretty quick.
That is one thing I would say. Most coaches out there are not much on the liberal arts.
Right.
Always was. Loved art. Loved to draw.
Yeah.
Loved technical art too. Now I'm probably more on the technical art side than the traditional art side, but I've always loved it. I just,
But you taught it.
I did. So when I started over at South Terrebonne, I actually started on the elementary level at first year to wait for my turn to get at South Terrebonne. South Terrebonne had a program called Multimedia Research and Production. Dow Hamblin, who had come in to here from Texas, moved on. He went to North Carolina, and I sort of stepped into his shoes, even though it was impossible to step into Dow's shoes. He was terrific. But it was fun. And you guys here at HTV sort of helped us along the way, because we kind of thought we were an innovator. You know, it was still the time of Betamax and still the time of good old VHS tapes and stuff. But it was neat to show the kids that there was an opportunity in art. The other thing was, I taught a couple art classes, so on a Friday night, if we needed the big logo in the middle of the field, that Stan, can you, many a time, Richie Curling come knocking on my door early Friday morning, and when you getting out there and putting the big ST on the middle of the field? Or, even got a call from guys like Jay Thomas at Nichols. Can you come put it in on the middle of our field? Or Seth Thibodeau in baseball. We want the logo painted on the field.
Or Phil Donez when we had the banquet.
That's right.
Stan, we need 14 or whatever it was.
That's right.
On plywood, big old plywood.
Loved it. Didn't have any problems doing that. It was something that I thought the kids got a kick out of. They understood that art could be a viable career opportunity. So yeah, I'm very lucky. I love sports and I love art, and I got to do both of them.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
Let's take the people on a little journey, because like I said, we're going to be telling you about Stan on HTV and all that, but he had so many things going on. But one of his passions, of course, was kids and sports. So take me through that journey, if you could.
I think I took the job I mentioned working over at South Terrebonne with Dickie Pierce. I think I initially took the job to be a coach. And somewhere along the way, I realized that it was more about being the teacher than being the coach, even though I do believe that you have to be a great teacher to be a coach. I started to realize that, sounds sort of cliche and cheesy, but they sort of are the future. I also realized, and listen, in high school, I was relatively laid back. I graduated with a class of 528. I found that out just the other day. 528 kids.
That's incredible.
I didn't know a lot of the people in my class, very shy. But when I got back and taught in a high school setting, I think I realized that those kids who participated in extracurriculars, not necessarily sports, whether it was band, dancing, SGA, the chess club, whatever, those are our future. That's if you sat down a group of a Rotary Club or a civic organization or an environmental agency and asked them, hey guys, I want all of you who participated in something in high school. You did something. You raise your hand. You get 9 out of 10. That's our leaders. And then that's when I started realizing how important it was for these kids to sort of make strides and step up and do things. And I would encourage them to try and do things throughout their careers on the high school level. It was challenging. And I was sort of home. I grew up in Montague, and that was home for me, and that was where South Terrebonne. And I had great inspiration. In the town of Montague, when I grew up, you have people like, Laddie Freeman, who's an assistant district attorney, Laurie Crochet, who dance on Broadway, Kevin, a good friend, Kevin Belanger is the CEO of, South Central Planning. Great athletes, Tommy Boudreau was there, Rusty LaBeouf, who played over at Nichols, Stan Fobb, who was a good friend, some of my friends, Joey Chasson, Doug Trotsky, all of these guys were terrific in that little bitty town. So I just thought, if we can sort of keep this going, I think things would work out really well. Now, that being said, South Coast moved out of Montague, Texaco moved out of Montague, and things changed. And Juan hit in '85. I think that was a big hit to that area, and you know that from when you first started here. But no, I just thought on the high school level it was time for me to sort of play my part and make sure that these kids understood what the future might be and could be for them.
You don't come across as a country boy. I don't say that in a bad way. You do, because you always have a tie on or a coat, or you're doing public speeches for the hospital, you on TV. So I bet if anybody walked in the room and they said, Stan's not a country boy, but you got country all in your past.
Absolutely. I would call it country Cajun, right?
Yeah.
You know, Gravois and Como, you know. So, yeah, I'm a small town product who understands. My mom and dad were very good about telling us that in your future, there are adaptations and changes you have to make, you know. Do what you like and be who you are, yet be it in a very presentable way. So I think I kind of piggybacked on what they had always showed us. And they weren't a big, you know, sit down and tell us about this kind of thing. It was always they led by example.
I always ask the question to people, were your parents strict? In your case, I would assume they knew what they had. They knew the kids they had. They knew y'all were pretty grounded as a family from what I saw when you were going through all the sitting and everything else. So they probably didn't have to be too strict on you all.
No, and listen, when they needed to be stern, they could be, certainly. I had 4 older sisters who were just role models. They all did well in school. They were probably, it sounds funny, but my 4 sisters were probably the start of me having kind of the passion for sports I did, because they were all in dance or cheer or band. So when I was, you know, 9 years old, 8 years old, I was going to ball games. You know, and I was seeing Melvin Johnson run with the ball at South Terrebonne. I could remember the chants in the stands of give it to Leroy Simmons, you know, when I was a kid. So that kind of percolated in my brain. Saturday mornings, I could remember riding with my dad in the sugarcane field because it was grinding time, right? And in the daytime, he would listen to Tulane, and at night, he would listen to LSU games. So the Tulane games were really special because he'd keep on saying, that's Mike Walker, he's from Terrebonne High School, you know, and Tulane was really good in those days. And then at night.
They beat LSU.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, you know, that always sort of formulated that, you know, I enjoy this, I like being around it. One of my sisters was on the homecoming court at Nichols in like 74, 75. And I can remember going to those games with, you know, Ted Bergeron, friend Ted playing there and stuff. So, I think because I had 4 older sisters, it actually led to me enjoying sports a lot.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
This is the importance of what I think we do, and you were such a big part of this. I was at a place one time, and a gentleman comes up to me, and he goes, Martin, I know you don't know because you never met me, but I want to thank you because you have kept this relay team alive at South Terrebonne for many, many years. I said, well, I don't know who you are. So who are you? He said, I'm Ricky Britt. And I said, I've said your name 1,000 times, you know, with Robert Lagarde and Melvin Johnson and Herman Verdin.
Yep.
And it was just an unbelievable relay team that was fastest in the nation. And to this day, the time still holds. So I think what you've been able to do with the foundation and everything else that goes on, all these old guys that would have been blown away in the wind, they still got their names out.
I love it. If I, you know, listen, and I'll take the opportunity to thank the hospital, thank you, thank everybody who's involved with making sure that never dies. You know, not necessarily that it was my childhood, because those 4 guys, I can remember that, you know, when I was a young elementary guy, how good they were. I can remember them putting the sign in front of South Terrebonne High School that they were the 1973 track and field 4A state champions. So that was sort of personal to me. But then I go on to find out about Earl Grow in the late 50s and Coach Swab to the point of knowing him as a coach, because you know, he was sort of one of my peers for a little while, but not knowing how good he was at LSU. So I'm glad we can sort of relive this. And you know, that relay team, that was special when you consider that there never was before and probably never will be 4 guys that fast running that relay, that they were the fastest guys in America that year, high schoolers, you know.
All from the Berg area.
All from the Berg area.
It blows my mind. And let me ask you that while I have you, because at Vanderbilt, we knew everybody, because like Harry said on his one-on-one, we all knew everybody because we played ball against everybody. But every time we suited up in anything against South Terrebonne, there was always quiet in the locker room. And I was thinking back on that the other day. And we weren't quiet because we were nervous, or we were quiet because we knew where we were about to go again. They're going to hit the snot out of you, or you better have your A game. There was something about that school.
You know, and as I was growing up, I can remember starting there, you always sort of intimidated to go out for a sport there because you know the numbers were there, right? I mentioned I had you know, over 500 in my graduating class. But what you also knew was there was a little bit of history. You always knew about Coach Marcello and what he was about. When I went, and I was a baseball guy, the team right before me had, you know, guys like Barry Pellegrin, you know, Brian Life, and guys who were really good, and they went to the quarterfinals, so you always knew. But we had and I don't want to call it cockiness, we had a little era with us over there at South Terrebonne.
Y'all did?
Yeah, that like, you know, everybody else in the parish is kind of like, they can't play with us kind of thing. And they could. They really could. Because if you look at some of the scores, now I look at some of the scores and go, what were we thinking, you know? But that being said, no, there was a little bit of that. And consider this, when I was in high school, Lionel Wallace was a terrific athlete, went on to play at LSU. Skippy Ezel. Now, what more do I have to say? I had a long conversation with Skippy the other day, and it was so fun. I told Skippy, you're the reason I never panned out in football. He said, why is that? I said, you threw the ball so damn hard I couldn't catch it. I mean, Skippy grew up working out with Frank Lewis. You know, he's in the 9th grade, and that's who he's working out with.
Right.
And then he's playing on the high school level. Jay Penison, who obviously played professional ball. I mentioned Stan. Stan was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates. Clarence Verdin was an all-pro. Troy Johnson played for 6 years in NFL. While I'm in high, that's my classmates, right? That's the guys I went to. And I'm forgetting some. There was some other terrific. Carl Williams was a terrific athlete over there.
I had to jump against him in basketball. And I thought I was a pretty good jumper. Being a high jumper and all. Well, I got to center court. He looks at me, you know, he had the big afro.
Yes, he did.
And he was very intimidating. And he says, Falls, don't even jump.
that was
and
Carl
he was
Williams.
Right.
That was
But
Carl
he
Williams.
could have played defensive back in the NFL.
Oh, sure.
Or running
that's
back.
what I'm saying. It's just guys you never knew.
Yeah.
Listen, I mentioned I grew up, some of my closest friends down in Montague who were like, you know, Joey Chesson was a terrific basketball player, but when you get to South Terrebonne, there's so many. So that I think it was quantity. There was so many people there that made quality.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.